Hey Gulf Country fans! There are supposed to be 4 aluminum heat shields attached to the underside of the Gulf Country. My car is missing the heat shield for the rear silencer. New ones are hard to find and expensive. Please post in the comments if you know where I can buy a serviceable used one. Thanks. In the meantime, I'll show you how I refurbished the 3 heat shields that I do have, starting with the catalytic converter installation. This first heat shield differs from the others in that its top side is insulated with fiberglass and a layer of aluminum foil. In my case, the foil had peeled off in some areas, allowing the fiberglass insulation to absorb grease and other contaminants. At first, I gently scrubbed the part with Goo Gone, hoping to save as much of the original material as possible. But I later decided to remove the compromised foil and fiberglass so that I could replace them with new materials. The fiberglass insulation had been glued to the aluminum heat shield, so it required a lot of scraping and scrubbing to remove all of it. After scrubbing the part for more than an hour, I gave it a once-over in the blasting cabinet. Then the aluminum heat shield was ready for straightening. In preparation for primer and paint, I wiped down the part with wax and grease remover. Next, I sprayed the heat shield with 2 coats of VHT flameproof primer. I followed up the primer with 2 coats of VHT flameproof silver paint. I shopped around for foil-faced fiberglass insulation to replace what I had removed. The best option I found was this Frost King pipe insulation. Because it's only 3 inches wide, I had to cut the insulation into multiple strips that I glued on using Eastwood carpet adhesive. Each time I added a strip of insulation to the heat shield, I sealed its seam with the adjacent strip by applying foil tape. Once I had all of the insulation glued on, I applied foil tape all the way around on the exposed edges. The heat shield that straddles the drive shaft was next. I scrubbed it for about a half hour with Goo Gone to remove stains and residue left by rodents, grease, and road dirt. After scrubbing, sandblasting. The shield needed a little straightening and one of its mounting tabs was broken off. The original spot welds had failed, so I reattached the mounting tab using a couple of number 6 machine screws, hex nuts, and lock washers. I was able to clean the third heat shield using a wire wheel and sandblasting. This heat shield was pretty banged up, so I took my time straightening it. All 3 mounting points were corroded to varying degrees, so I needed a way to patch them. I considered using steel washers, but didn't have a good way to fasten them to the heat shield. I went to my scrap pile and pulled out a strip of stainless steel molding from the 1953 Chevy. After measuring the mounting point recesses on the heat shield, I cut the appropriately sized patch pieces from the Chevy molding. I flattened out the patches, then trimmed them to fit. All told, I made 3 matching pairs of these stainless steel patches so that I could sandwich the heat shield between 2 patch halves at each of the 3 mount points. I clamped the patch halves in place and drilled holes through them to receive pop rivets. As fate would have it, my 1/8 inch drill bit was dull, so I grabbed my drill doctor to sharpen it. The dull drill bit gets loosely inserted into the chuck. The chuck is then inserted into the alignment jig, where the twist bit is correctly positioned for both angle and depth. Snugging down the collar on the chuck holds the bit tightly in place. The chuck assembly can then be inserted into the sharpener, where the tip of the drill bit makes controlled contact with the diamond cutting wheel. The chuck is manually rotated in a clockwise direction without exerting any downward pressure. It's normal for the chuck to rock back and forth during each rotation. Before long, the grinding sound will get shorter and quieter. This is because the drill makes less and less contact with the cutting wheel as it's cut down to size. A small drill bit like this only takes about a minute to sharpen. Now that I can drill holes again, it's time for pop rivets. I secured each of the patches with 4 rivets. With the 3 patches firmly in place, I used a step bit to drill 1 large hole into each patch to mimic the original mounting holes. Here I'm determining which step most closely matches the original hole and marking it for drilling. Fabrication work is done. Let's make sure it fits. Before painting it, I give the part a thorough wipe down with wax and grease remover. I'm just using up a partial can of VHT header paint left over from another project. The heat shields are fastened to the car with these round speed clips. Most of my original clips were missing or unusable, so I bought new ones. Here's the refurbished catalytic converter shield, already positioned on the car. Each speed nut gets pushed onto its threaded stud, then snugged up with a couple of clockwise turns. This shield is still missing a mounting tab, but I didn't sweat it because the M8 nut does a good job of securing the part in place. And here's the finished product. Thanks for watching. In my next video, I'll reinstall the frame and suspension components.